Hi, I'm Jane.
I would like to offer you a little tutorial on Gregorian chant notation and score and reading a score for our purposes of both reading and transcribing. I would like to cover a few basics so that we are all on the same page with these little pieces of information and help us move forward in your work. So first piece, clefs. Gregorian chant did not have the concept of fixed notation. It was very fluid, not fixed, no letter names, and used solfege. So there are two clefs in Gregorian chant, the do clef and the fa clef. So we see here the do clef. I'm looking at it backwards, so I hope I get this right. So this neum right here is on do. The line goes right through to the middle. This neum is on the third line. We have a 4-line staff, as you probably know by now. So do is on the third line, and here do is on the second line. These do's can be any starting point, and so let's say do is the fundamental. Let's say this is do and it's G. We pitch it on the harp, so that would make do. This would make re, mi. It's kind of cool to sing on the solfege. I like it because I believe that it accesses like more right brain relationship to music than thinking of them as fixed pitches. You can experiment and see what you like. So this down here we have the fa clef. We see the third line go right through to the center. That makes this a fa. Here we have fa on the second line. So if this is fa, then we go to mi and we go to re. And a porta starts on re. So a porta basically goes re, do, re, fa, mi, re. I'm just reading it right off the thing. So re, do, re, fa. Am I the right one? Re, do, re, fa, mi, re. Right? So that's how the pattern is realized through solfege symbols. But however, when we notate it to modern score, again, this can be any note, but we at Accorda are calling this fa F, which would make this D. So we are in D hypodorian. Next, we have a punctum. A punctum is a single note. Punctum, the meaning of punctum literally is point. It's a point. And you can just imagine, the oral tradition, and then the first, let's put a point here for that note, because there was no notation for a long time. And then, just to try to convey as Gregorian chant started to move outward into different monasteries and different countries, actually, they needed a way to communicate outside of just the oral tradition. So I just can imagine, let's put a point on the parchment, and that's note. One pulse for the punctum. Next is the virga. The virga also is one pulse, one syllable, but it has a stem, and that's just there to somehow a visual aid to help define sometimes a configuration of neums. So not to worry about that too much, just as long as you know what it is when you see it. We have quite a few of these in a porta. I guess keep my face over here behind the sheet. Um, Podatus, a podatus. Podatus, its root is foot or to step, so, and we can see we're stepping up. So this is one syllable for two ascending notes. A podatus can be actually any interval. So we see it here stepwise, and a porta has a lot of small intervals. It doesn't have large intervals. The Dorian mode, if we flat the B, ends up having wider intervals than often the Hypo-Dorian does. It's a little closer in character, in intervallic character. So this would be two notes. So it would be like a, let's see, right? So we have two notes of porta ascending, always going from bottom to top. Next we have the clevis. I think of cleave like things that are cleaved, like a cleaver, where we separate our cleavage. So the clevis is the reverse of the podatus. It descends. It always goes from right to left. And we have anta. So por is a podatus, and ta is a clevis. So ta, sorry, por ta. So the ta is a clevis. We have a dotted punctum, which lengthens the punctum by 2 pulses. In Gregorian chant, the pulse, it's not as rigid as modern music, where we have to be, extremely precise, especially in ensemble work, and just we have like large ensembles being extremely precise. Gregorian chant just has a little more relaxation around the sense of pulse. So, but this is essentially 2 pulses long, and if you have a dotted punctum at the end, or 2 of them, it's punctum mora, and that is the dying away. Mora, dying away. This is something good to know about. It's at the end of a staff. You have this little kind of half virga, and it's basically a courtesy note to let you know what the first note is on the second line. And you can see that in a porta, the end of the line. We have an epizema, which is this horizontal line. It's a line that denotes that note should be given some expression, and it's given expression by just slightly lengthening it, and I like to think more like stretching it, not like just kind of a functional lengthen. It's more like has an energic kind of visceral feeling of pull on it. And then lastly, oops, you can see through that, can't you? Let me just put something behind it. We have the lines. We have a quarter line, we have a half line, and we have a full line. The quarter line indicates a pause, but it does not indicate a breath. And if you have a full scola, you can often get away with not having a breath there. If you're singing solo, it's kind of hard to not take a breath often at the bar line. But the intention is not to break the flow of the line. So that's the thing about the quarter. The half, you can take a breath there. One can take a breath there. And of course the full, you can take a breath there. I'm just remembering in Scola, one thing I really loved about the full line, these are people who are revitalizing Gregorian chant in the actual Catholic liturgy. And so it's a big movement and the schola that I was in used to have this beautiful long silence, sometimes at the full bar, like just to allow this silence. And this particular director, and it was affirmed by some of the other schola singers, that it wasn't just a functional breath, a functional silence, but that people would often do a bit of repetitive prayer in that silence, so that the silence was full of a kind of spiritual content. It wasn't just an empty silence. It wasn't just a waiting around that way. It was actually really a lot of spiritual presence in that silence. They were actually sometimes very, very full silences. So those are the lines, and I already did the epizema. Okay. So we have a porta, and I'm upside down. I have to put something behind it. And we kind of discussed all the nuts and bolts of it, and so now we can look at it and see the whole thing. Of course, we know that the chant is beyond the sum of its parts, but we need those parts to realize it effectively. It takes a lot of singing a chant to really begin to understand the flow of the chant and let the nuts and bolts kind of go in the background and support the realization of the chant. So that's my phone clicking. Sorry about that. Let me shut it off. It'll keep clicking. So we did talk about pretty much everything on this score. What we did not talk about was the rhythm. There are treatises done about Gregorian chant rhythm and different ways to do it, and the pacing. But for our purposes, we will let the declamation of the text create the chant, the flow of the chant, and the rhythm of the chant. So you have a couple of things. You have the accents of words, and then you have the high notes. So so we have the epizema. A porta inferi. Here's a high note. Arue Domine, anima meam. So you see it's kind of a glare. So I'll do that one more time. So I'm realizing some of the epizemas, and I don't know how you've been doing it in Schola. I'm just realizing those, and of course, we aren't a church schola. We are a schola that will be working with physiological elements, with a lot of elements that will determine the pacing of the chant, which changes all the rules about breathing or not breathing. So, but I do think to embody the chant, to really feel the ebb and flow of it, and if it changes, it doesn't. In piano, we had this thing called rubato, and you can't. The rubato is the stretching, like Chopin. The stretching of a phrase is just part of playing Chopin, but you cannot do rubato if you don't have a good sense of what the original is before the rubato. So it's a little bit a parallel. So you want to realize this chant kind of correctly, kind of how it's intended, and then it can be shaped from there as we need at the bedside. So a porta inferi, arue Domine, anima mea. Sorry. So I hope that's helpful. Looks like we did a 15-minute little tutorial, which was my intention. And I have a resource sheet for what I use, things I love, and also things I use for this little tutorial. And I'll probably upload it to Thinkific. So, but here it is. Okay. Thank you.